Welcome to our participants today. We thank you for joining us for this workforce adjustment information session on surplus priority and reasonable job offers. My name is Felipe Godoy. I'm part of the member engagement team here at PIPS. I'm also joined by my colleague, Catherine Gagnon, as well as Tab and Dyke and Dean Tonsik from the National Policy Office. To begin, we'd like to take some time to respectfully acknowledge that our office, located in Ottawa, is on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. Before this land was the city, it was and remains a place for the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, whose presence here reaches back over 8,000 years. As settlers, it is our responsibility to educate ourselves on the history of the First Peoples and to learn how to be respectful of their culture, to acknowledge their pain and our part in it. This journey of understanding is uncomfortable, but part of discovering our past and how we continue to benefit from it is the duty to grow and to change in order to want to do better. Working towards change, we can be hopeful that our journey guides us to a peaceful, inclusive, and respectful future, one where we can hope to have done the work required to be seen as guests of this great land and its First Peoples and be part of their community. If you have started the journey of learning whose territory you work and live on, we invite you to make an acknowledgement in the Q&A. At the beginning of our webinars, we'd like to provide you with our equity statement, which clearly outlines our expectations from our participants. If you could please take a moment to review the statement, the link is in the chat box. As noted, the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada strives to create a climate that is respectful, safe, and inclusive, where we all feel welcome, valued, and where we are supported to make our contribution and support others to make theirs. We thank you for being part of this inclusive space. Now let's go over some key information about Zoom. Due to the size of the group, we have muted your computers to ensure we have the best sound quality for everyone participating and for those who will watch later. Please use the Q&A icon in Zoom to send a message if you have any questions or technical issues during the webinar. Today, we're going to discuss workforce adjustment in the public service, focusing on surplus priority status and how reasonable job offers are defined, and what to expect if you are searching for another position. We will have a question and answer period at the end of our session. I will now pass it over to Dean and Taya to begin today's information session. Folks.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here to listen and participate in our presentation today. To get started, I'll just ask that we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. The workforce adjustment can be a pretty tricky process, and every workforce adjustment situation is a bit nuanced. If you're looking for a more comprehensive walkthrough of the entire WFA process or just want a refresher, we do have a past webinar and the slide decks available on the PIPS website that are a good reference and remain available for you to access. When we're talking about WFA, the main source of reference is the WFA appendix, and that can be found in your PIPS collective agreement. I'll note that the WFA appendix that PIPS uses is not the same across all bargaining agents. Some bargaining agents have opted into the NJC Workforce Adjustment Directive, but PIPS hasn't. So while the terminology and the concepts may overlap between the two, the rules and the entitlements that flow from it don't always align. So our presentation is a reflection of the information in the PIPS core groups agreements. So I'll urge you to continue referencing your own collective agreement when you're looking for specific information. So our focus today is on surplus employees and reasonable job offers. So whether you are currently in surplus status or if you're an opting employee considering which option you're going to choose at the end of your opting period, or if you've been notified that your services may no longer be needed and just want to see what could be next in your WFA journey, we hope that this session will be helpful for that. Next slide, please. Thank you. Before we jump into the main content of the presentation, I think it's useful that we take a bit of a step back and define a couple of the key terms that we use throughout this presentation and that often come up when talking about WFA. And those are surplus status and surplus priority. An employee is in surplus status when they've been formally declared in writing, meaning the employer has determined that their substantive position is no longer required because of a WFA situation. Being declared surplus doesn't mean that that employee is laid off right then and there, but the surplus status is more of a protective status as it triggers rights, supports, and obligations under the WFA appendix. And this brings us to means that as a surplus employee, you would have priority to appointments above non-priority candidates across the public service for positions that you meet the essential qualifications for. So while these are two different terms, they essentially run in parallel to each other. Next slide, please. Thank you. So now that we've talked about what surplus status means by definition, I just want to talk about briefly how an employee gets there. There really are two avenues to surplus status, and those are being in receipt of a guarantee of a reasonable job offer from the deputy head, or when an opting employee chooses option A, which is the 12-month limited surplus priority period. So both avenues result in surplus status, but they're fundamentally different in how someone would get to that status. The main difference is that the guarantee of a reasonable job offer is a commitment from the employer to continued employment, whereas surplus status from option A comes from an opting employee's choice to pursue continued employment. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Avenue 1 to surplus status, again, is when an affected employee, meaning an employee who's been told in writing that their services may no longer be required, receives a guarantee of a reasonable job offer. And this could be after a voluntary departure program is ran, or after a SIRLO process where the employer would have a better idea of what positions are going to exist going forward. If an employee receives a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, again, it means that the employer has determined that they know or they can predict continued employment for that employee somewhere in the public administration. So an employee would receive this and they are placed in their surplus status immediately after that notification. This status is a result of the employer's commitment to continued employment. Surplus status from a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, there is no minimum or maximum time limit to this surplus period and to your priority entitlement to appointments. Technically speaking, the surplus priority could be in effect indefinitely and until the employee receives at least one reasonable job offer. Alternatively, employees could receive a reasonable job offer as soon as the first day of their surplus period. If you receive a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, you won't have access to the opting options. So that would be the transition support measure or the education allowance. And the reasoning for this is that the employer has already made the commitment to providing continued employment. So the focus would then shift to finding and securing the reasonable job offer. Next slide, please. Thank you. When the employer can't provide someone with a reasonable job offer, they would instead become an opting employee. And as an opting employee, you would have 120 days to make a choice between three options. And at a very high level, these three options are option A, the limited 12-month surplus priority period, option B, the transition support measure, and option C is the transition support measure plus an education allowance. If the opting employee chooses option A, so that 12-month surplus priority period, that means that you are choosing to stay employed and want to use your surplus priority status to try and secure a reasonable job offer. So that's the second avenue to achieving surplus status. Once the choice is made, choosing option A, your WFA status would switch from opting to surplus status. In this context, again, surplus status is a reflection of the employee's commitment to pursue continued employment, even if the employer couldn't make this commitment themselves in giving you a guarantee of a reasonable job offer. Choosing option A gives the employees more time, although it's limited time, more access and ongoing support to find a reasonable job offer. So once someone is declared to be in surplus status, regardless of how they get there, the focus then turns to finding a reasonable job offer, and that becomes sort of the main priority. Next slide, please. Thank you. Before we jump into talking about the reasonable job offer, I did want to touch on the role of the Public Service Commission. And the Public Service Commission is another key party to the WFA appendix. And essentially, legislation gives the Public Service Commission a role in a WFA situation, particularly in administering surplus and layoff entitlements. So as an an independent agency, their role in this context is to ensure that those priorities are being respected. When an employee is made surplus, the employer is required to provide notice to the commission of that employee's surplus status. This notification allows the commission to monitor the number of surplus employees through their system, and this is called the Priority Information Management System. And this system helps to facilitate appointments across departments, across organizations, and agencies. The commission also provides information directly to surplus or laid-off employees with information about their priority entitlements, and they'll also refer employees to positions across the public service for which they potentially meet the essential qualifications. This referral will happen unless the employee has provided in writing that they aren't available for appointment. Secondly, the commission ensures that employees are being fairly and properly assessed against the essential qualifications of the position. And even after an appointment is made, let's say a surplus employee is appointed to a lower level position, they will ensure that reinstatement priority to the employee's formal level is being respected. In addition to this, the commission also has an oversight role. They receive information from departments and agencies about the administration of priority entitlements, which allows the commission to monitor compliance with those priorities. The commission will report back to the employer and to PIPs that speak to the referrals of surplus and laid off employees, as well as the numbers and the status of employees that are in their system, their information system. So all of this to say the commission ensures access and monitors compliance and sort of acts like a vehicle towards employees having access to reasonable job offers. So the next slide, I'll hand over to Dean to go into reasonable job offers themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Taya. Now, considering what elements are part of a reasonable job offer, it's important to note that an offer of indeterminate employment is focused on the core public administration. So it includes departments and agencies in Schedules 1 and 4 of the Financial Administration Act. It can also include offers from separate agencies, Scheduled 5 under DF or of DFA, so CRA, NRC, Canada Revenue Agency. Those are just to give an example of the agencies with whom you can obtain a reasonable job offer. We'll get into the definition as well of what is a reasonable job offer. But the appointment is at a rate of pay and an attainable salary maximum, not less than the employee's current salary, and attainable maximum that would be in effect on the date of offer. It should be a seamless transfer of all employee benefits. Next slide, please. When we say normally at equivalent level, the department shall avoid reappointment to a lower level, except where all other avenues have been exhausted. So it's equivalent at an equivalent level. It can be offered at a lower level than the salary provision. Salary protection provisions kick in, and they are appointed to a position with an equivalent or higher maximum rate of pay from the position from which they were declared surplus. So what that means, so if I'm offered a lower paid position, I become salary protected. So my salary is protected, but I won't be getting any increments from a salary perspective other than the economic increments increases until the lower level position meets or catches up with your previous substantive position. And in many cases, it may not be. So while not ideal, you get salary protection. However, you may be behind in terms of any future salary scales that are implemented. You will get the economic increases, but not necessarily, the yearly salary scale increase. Employees will be, however, even though you've been salary protected, employees will be given reinstatement priority for reappointment to formal level. So under the Public Service Commission, which Taya referred to earlier, you are entitled to priority reappointment to a level position or to your formal group and level, right? And I believe the appointments is for the priority status is for 5 years. So within those 5 years, you have the possibility of returning to your substantive position a similar substantive decision. So it won't be necessarily that position, but equivalent to your former group and level. Salary protection only applies to the initial appointment following a WFA situation. So should you decide on your own volition to leave that salary protected provision, well, the salary protection provisions do not follow you. It's only for that position to which you were offered a guarantee of a reasonable job offer. Next question, please. Sorry, next slide. Elements, the continued elements of a reasonable job offer. If required, the employee must be trainable. So it's important here that when they do make a salary or a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, the employer has to look at your particular circumstances, right? They can't just do a paper exercise, okay, and look at, they don't have exactly what we need. Well, as long as you meet the essential qualifications of the position, i.e., the language requirements, the education, and the experience, then you should be appointed. However, if you need a refresher training, that should be considered because it says trainable. So if you need to brush up on certain technical aspects of the job, the employer must allow you to meet those requirements by offering the training. So that's where it particularly comes to light when you're being offered an equivalent level position. So, I'm a PG and I have an IT background, but the salary matches, the match is good, but, I haven't, I need some refresher courses because the IT world has evolved over time. So they need to take that into consideration. And they can't just say, oh, you're not an IT and you don't have the most recent up-to-date knowledge or experience. Well, they need to provide you the opportunity to gain that experience and knowledge. So again, so surplus employees are eligible for training provided that it is needed to facilitate the appointment of the individual to a known or anticipated vacancy when there's a shortage of qualified candidates. There are no other qualified priority personas on the priority list. You should see persons. Um, an employee with surplus priority entitlements may be entitled to up to 2 years of retraining. So that's a considerable um, uh, opportunity, and the employer cannot just deny it for issues that are not grounded in the requirements of the position, right? So although they have discretion, it has to be exercised reasonably. And again, if there's an accommodation need, for trainability, if you can require accommodation or ask for it, and the employer has a duty to accommodate. Whether you have, and we'll see, whether it's from a cognitive perspective, if you need certain visual aids, learning aids, the employer must look into that seriously, and it's part of their duty to accommodate under the Canadian Human Rights Act. So while a position is being targeted, when it comes to offering a reasonable guarantee of a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, they have to look at the person's personal a situation. So take into account what needs are required, so to avoid any barriers, right? And this includes anything related to employment equity and diversity and accessibility in the workplace, right? So again, they need to look at your personal circumstances, and we'll see also that there's a mobility requirement. Well, mobility means that can you just uproot your family and move to another province, another city? May not be deemed as reasonable because you have family obligations, whether it's taking care of your children, and you can't just uproot your children from school, or you have obligations towards family members. You care for your elderly parents, for example, or another family member, or if you have your own, again, needs and limitations and restrictions in terms of, well, I have mobility issues. How is this going to work? So again, they need to look at your particular circumstances. Is the point I'm trying to drive home. Next slide, please. So if required, again, the employee must be mobile, again, taking into account your particular circumstances, and they deem this to be, so they define it in geographic zones. So zone 1, it's within the employee's headquarters, as defined in the travel directive. Zone 2, within 40 kilometers of the employee's place of work. And then there's beyond, zone 3, beyond 40 kilometers. So again, the question we are often asked, well, okay, so technically, based on this description, it can be anywhere in Canada. Indeed, a reasonable job offer can be considered reasonable even if it's from coast to coast. But again, it depends on the personal circumstances of the person that's being offered the position. So for certain people, it may be deemed reasonable. For others, it may not. So again, that's what we encourage folks to connect with your steward or your staff resource at PIPS in order to tease this out and to determine whether or not this constitutes a reasonable job offer. Thank you. So surplus employees who relocate shall be deemed to be employee on employer requested relocations. Yes. So any request for relocation, the employer, on behalf of the employer or by the employer, they assume the cost. So the relocation directive under the National Joint Council, it's a whole separate directive that would apply to the situation, from anything from house hunting costs to reimbursement for for having to hire a real estate agent and whatnot. The travel directive is the relocation directive is very exhaustive and really explicitly states your rights and obligations. But in terms of financial repercussions, the relocation directive and the travel directive will reimburse you for certain costs. Next slide, please. Okay, alternation. Now, this has been a hot topic of late as well. What is alternation? How can I alternate? What resources do PIPs offer to help us help our members alternate? So we're going to address these in more detail. So alternation refers to a process whereby an opting employee who wishes to remain in the core public administration exchanges positions with a non-affected employee, the alternate. So essentially, I'm affected. I want to remain in the public service. I've not only been affected, but I don't have a reasonable guarantee of a job offer. So I've elected option A. This is now the opportunity. You can alternate into positions, and this will be done so with a non-affected employee. So someone who wants to leave the public service and who conversely would be entitled to certain benefits, transition support measure. They will be entitled to potentially severance. So these would be under option B or C. One, where they want to leave as well and benefit from pursuing higher education for the education allowance, or changing programs or whatnot, changing fields, expertise. So that's available to the alternate, the non-affected employee, right? And they would be entitled to a pension waiver as well. And I wanted to distinguish the pension waiver that's already incorporated in your collective agreement and is governed by the Public Service Superannuation Act. It's an independent process than what the government is offering now in terms of the early retirement incentive. So this is something that's new, not incorporated in the collective agreement, subject to being passed by the legislation. What we hear is that will likely be passed in the House, and it will likely come into effect sometime in February or March. But essentially, we want to distinguish this from your entitlements under the collective agreement. And all this offers is the opportunity for folks who don't meet the minimum requirements currently under the Federal Public Service Superannuation Act to leave without penalty. So we know we have two groups of pension plan contributors. We have the group one. So these are folks hired prior to December 31st, 2012. This category of employees, they can retire at age 55 with 30 years of service, or age 60 with at least 2 years of service. And then there's age category 2. So these are folks hired as of January 1st, 2013. Well, their normal retirement date without penalty has been pushed back by 5 years. Okay, so we know that. So if you're 55 and 30, or 60 with 2 years of service, or 60 and 65 as a group 2 contributor, you can leave without penalty, right? Under the Public Service Superannuation Act. If you don't meet the minimum requirements in terms of age, 50, if you're under 55 and don't have 30 years, or to reach 60 years, you get a lifetime penalty of 5% for every year of not meeting that threshold. So it's a lifetime penalty. What this early resolution incentive provides is the opportunity to leave the public service without penalty. So if you're at least 50 years old and you have at least 2 years of pensionable service, the government says you can take your pension. We're not going to penalize you for not meeting the minimum threshold under the public service superannuation legislation. So we're going to waive the penalty, but you're not getting anything extra. You're not going to get a top up for not having reached. So if you decide to leave today and you have 5 more years of pensionable service, the employer is not going to provide you with a package, so to speak, like incentivize your departure. They're just saying, you don't meet the minimum requirements. That's okay. You're at least 50 years old. You can leave without penalty. So your pension will be based essentially on what you've accrued so far. So I just wanted to make that point. I think there's some questions in that regard in the chat, but I just wanted to clarify because it's not very well being communicated, and we just wanted to ensure that, folks understand the clear ramifications of leaving the public service and not getting anything extra other than their pension without penalty. So that's for those who've been targeted or received letters. I believe at least 68,000 public servants to date, if not more, have received this option by the government. So they likely looked at obviously your age and noticed that you don't necessarily meet their minimum requirements, but they're willing to waive them as an incentive, obviously. So I wanted just to bring that to your consideration, for your consideration. So alternation again refers to so we discussed the person who's affected and the non-affected employee, and those are folks who choose option A. So within those 120 days, you can also request that when you receive your options letter to say if you take only 30 days to make a decision, although we counsel folks to take their time to make a decision within those 120 days, so to ensure that they understand the ramifications of their choice. And there's no right choice, it's what's right for the individual. But if you choose, okay, you're sure you want to take option A, you answered within 30 days, you can ask the remainder, so the balance of the 120 days, 90 days, to tack it on to the 12-month priority status. So extend your ability to remain in the public service for another 90 days. So the 12 months plus 3 months, 15 months, in order for you to secure employment or be able to alternate. So it's important to take that into consideration and to ask your management, okay, I made my decision, please defer the 12 months and add the remaining time to it. So again, it's to maximize your employment opportunities, which is at the core, the message of the Workforce Adjustment Directive, and they shouldn't deny you that request. In terms of the alternation itself, so the employee must meet the position requirements of the position they are alternating into. And the alternation, again, sorry, apologies for the spelling, we'll address that. And the alternation must result in the permanent elimination of the position. So, for example, so you're the opting employee and someone wants to alternate with you, it has to lead to a permanent, so once the alternation occurs and within 5 days of the alternation, the alternate, so under the staffing regulations, must resign within 5 working days of the alternation being approved. Okay. So that means folks who want as the alternate, who's leaving the public service, they can choose the education allowance and remain on leave without pay so that they can, after 2 years, come back in government. So that option is not available to them. The only education option under C is that you take the education allowance and the transition support measure and the 17,000 towards your schooling expenses. So I just wanted to clarify that alternation will result in the end to the permanent elimination of the position. Approval of proposed alternation rests with management, yes. However, you can negotiate, obviously, a departure date, and they should show flexibility there. Next slide, please. Okay, receiving a reasonable job offer. So employee accepts reasonable job offer. That's the ideal situation. The situation is resolved. If appointed to a lower level position, employee salary protected and placed in reinstatement priority status for reappointment to formal level. Now you may ask, well, can I refuse more than one job offer? It depends. If the job offer clearly is not reasonable, again, it's the reasonableness of the offer. You can challenge it, right? And we'd argue this is not a reasonable job offer. Please provide me with a reasonable one. However, if the job offer is deemed reasonable, and again, depends on the personal circumstances, it may be the employer technically is not obliged to offer another reasonable job offer, right? So once they offer one that's deemed reasonable and you don't accept it, they can consider this potentially a refusal, subject again to challenging it on the grounds that we don't think it's reasonable. But if it's deemed reasonable and the employee refuses the job offer, you the you would be considered laid off, but no sooner than 6 months from beginning of the surplus period. So, if you get a job offer within, just in practical terms, you've made your choice, you're within the 12 months or 15 months. First month, you get a job offer, you decline it, and it ends up being considered a reasonable job offer for that you refuse. You can be laid off, but they have to wait 6 months, at least 6 months, so 5 more months before they can lay you off, and you require 1 month notice layoff. Uh, Once you're laid off, you will have priority status for 1 more year. So if you don't secure permanent employment within the 12 months or the 15 months, if it was extended, you will be considered laid off. Um, and you will nonetheless have priority status to reappointment. So then you go on leave without pay for a year, and you could potentially you have a priority status for 1 year. So any position that needs to be filled within the core central administration, they need to look at the priority list that's being governed by the Public Service Commission. They maintain that list, and they need to ensure that hiring managers are looking at the list in order to see, oh, okay, well, before I hire anyone else, I need to look at my priority list. And these folks have been laid off in our priority status, and I need to consider their application before all others, or subject. There's maybe one or two under the act that it has priority status as well. But as a laid off person, you're high up on the list. So they need to look at the list. And if they're not, you'll ask potentially the folks will ask, well, how do we know they're reviewing the list? Well, that's where with the help of your steward or your staff rep, we would ensure, are you considering, like we'd follow up with the Public Service Commission, is our member, being considered? What information do you have to share regarding whether or not his name or their name or his name was being looked at? And so there are ways of monitoring that. I just wanted to point that out. Next slide, please. Okay, the end of the surplus period. So Uh, technically, the surplus priority is in effect until the employee receives a reasonable job offer and is indeterminately appointed to another position. Until the surplus status is rescinded, potentially, it's possible that the employer may change their mind and say, although you're within a surplus status without a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, it may be rescinded and you may be in receipt of a guarantee reasonable job offer, or they decide they're not going to impact your position. Now your position is going to remain until the date of layoff, or if the employee chooses to resign. Those who have been provided with a guarantee of a reasonable job offer will remain surplus until he or she has been provided with at least one reasonable job offer. So that's important because when you do get the notice, you either get an affected status. That means your position may be impacted down the road. So that there's no action required there. There are no timelines. The affected status notice can remain indefinite in time because the employer may choose to rescind it or they don't know yet in terms of internal organization, resources, what they're going to offer. So you remain affected, status quo prevails, you continue working, you continue receiving your entitlements to benefits, all other provisions afforded to you under the collective agreement. But if they've declared surplus status with a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, they haven't yet provided you with the guarantee of a reasonable job offer. So what this means is that if you've been received this guarantee, then you remain on surplus status until you receive at least one reasonable job offer. So this is key, and there's no time limit in terms of when this reasonable job offer will occur. If an employee chooses to resign, no access to surplus priority protections and reinstatement priority. You're deemed laid off for the purposes of severance pay. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of employee obligations, as a surplus employee, your responsibilities to actively participate in securing a reasonable job offer. So let me, just talk about first about the alternation, because that was, we have a platform. PIPS has put together a platform. The government, we understand, is telling departments, because certain departments have created their own platform. And what we just heard recently is that the government is directing departments, so Treasury Board, that they use the government platform that they put forward, that they have going. So instead of having a departmental Serlo process, sorry, not Serlo, alternation process with the database, they should be migrating it all into the centralized Treasury Board system. So essentially what this list is, and then what we created, it's just a place where you go on our website, you can put your name in. So if you want to alternate, you put in your information. Hi, I've been affected. I'm on 12 months surplus priority status. This is, this is my linguistic profile, education requirements, experience. So you want to list the essential requirements that you have, and then folks who want to leave, they will put their information in terms of the position, linguistic profile, their position, and the other essential qualifications in terms of education and experience. And then folks will be able to network and discuss opportunities for alternation. So it's an unofficial, obviously, because alternation is the employer's responsibility. However, we see the need to assist our members in at least networking, getting their name out there and trying to facilitate an alternation. So I wanted to raise that to your attention for those who may not have been aware of the platform that's housed on the PIPS's website, and that the Treasury Board has its own alternation platform. So again, in terms of your responsibilities, I think it goes without saying that we cooperate with departments, organizations, and the Public Service Commission, provide timely information to assist in appointment activities, ensure they can be easily contacted by appointing departments in the Public Service Commission. Seriously consider job opportunities presented to them, including retraining, relocation possibilities, specified period appointments, and lower level appointments. So there's a lot of information there to unpack. So one aspect where I didn't specifically touch is term appointments. A term, and we've had that question asked recently, a term can be considered a reasonable job offer, can be, again, depending on the circumstance. It may be reasonable for one individual, whereas not individual for another. So a term can take the form of reasonable job offer, even though it's not indeterminate. But again, it's not the most desirable, but some folks may choose that and say, okay, you're offering me a 12-month term, 18-month term. Okay, I'll accept it if there's nothing better. And then you get that extra time in the public service to be able to secure indeterminate employment if that's ultimately what you're looking for. So that's, yes, so that's in terms of the responsibilities. I also want to point out that it's the employer's responsibility to find you a reasonable job offer and not for you as an affected member or who's not in receipt of a guarantee or reasonable job offer and therefore an opting employee. We've heard echoes that where some departments saying, it's up to you to find a job. We're not going to assign you any meaningful work. And we're just going to take this time to find yourself alternate employment. Well, no. Although we want members to have an active role, to get out there and network, it's the employer's responsibility. They can't turn around and say, well, we gave you 12 months to find a job. You didn't. Therefore, we're letting you go. No, where are your attempts to look at opportunities for me? So we can question them on that. But I just want to raise this, that there's some departments or agencies, fortunately, it's the exception, not the rule, that have communicated this to their employees, our members, and we're looking into that. But I wanted the point I was trying to make is that it's the employer's legal responsibility to make you a reasonable job offer. Next slide, please. So in terms of employer responsibilities, well, they have the responsibility to ensure employees are treated equitably. Again, we're going to correct the spelling, and given every reasonable opportunity for continued employment, including cooperating with the Public Service Commission and appointment departments in joint effort to redeploy surplus or laid off employees, establish systems to facilitate redeployment or retraining of affected surplus or laid off employees, prepare retraining plans when required to facilitate appointments, inform and counsel affected and surplus employees throughout the workforce adjustment process. I believe this ends the presentation. Next slide. Yes. So these are all the various resources that I'll, defer to Philippe and Catherine to speak to further. I just wanted to make a point and in light of the timing, the recent announcement. I mean, we all heard about return to office. I just want, on behalf of the National Policy Office and PIPS, we're not taking this lightly. We were surprised and shocked as everyone else. And I know PIPS is going to react to it, obviously. I know Sean O'Reilly had, I believe, 7 or 8 media interviews yesterday. So it's really important at the forefront of the agenda as well. And there'll be more information. And I'll defer to Felipe, who I think has more info to share on this.
Yeah, all I wanted to say to folks is that you should be receiving an email later today. We are sort of fighting this at the front lines, as Dean mentioned. Sean did have 8 interviews yesterday, a couple more today. We are taking this very seriously, and as we know more, we'll continue to update folks. We should be providing resources in the upcoming weeks, including a Know Your Rights webinar, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, so please keep an eye out for that. And as always, if you have any questions or anything related to RTO or WFA, we encourage you to use the Ask Us on our website or better together at pips.ca. But thank you so much, Dean and Taya, for all the information. We can now sort of take some time to answer any questions you might have about WFA. If you would like to ask our panelists a question, please use the Q&A tool located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll do our best to answer your questions. But if we run out of time or you think of a question post-webinar, please reach out to your local steward or send us a message through the Ask Us form. The links will be in the chat. We'll look to provide all participants with a webinar recording and resources that we mentioned today, so keep an eye out. In the next following weeks, we'll have a recording of all the webinars that we've done recently on our website very soon, if not today. So we can sort of look at the questions here. The first one is kind of a long one. I have a couple questions I'm hoping to be answered. One, when identified as surplus, what happens to accrued and accumulated vacation? Two, if on option A, I believe we still have all rights and benefits as per the contract, including accumulation pension, vacation, and benefits. In this instance, if you are halfway through an option A year and decide to retire instead, what is the process and impact?
Yes. So, sorry.
And let me know if you need me to repeat that. Happy to do that.
Thank you, Felipe. So yes, you would still continue accruing vacation, all your entitlements under the collective agreement, pensionable service, vacation accrual, provided that you meet the minimum threshold under the collective agreement, right? And having worked at least 15 days per month, I believe it is under the collective agreement. So yes, accrual is continued, entitlement to overtime, everything remains the same during that surplus period. Same salary. You should be provided with meaningful work again, commensurate with your education and experience, any classification, group, and level, right? So they can't just say, "Oh, you're surplus. We're not going to assign you any more work, and the collective agreement will no longer apply." No, I'm being facetious, but some employers have had this attitude, but no, you're entitled to your full protection under the collective agreement. And I believe the second part was if you choose to avail yourself of if you meet the requirements, if you've chosen option A and you want to retire, it all depends on, again, I would be cautious for the pension waiver because that's only usually afforded to folks who have chosen option B or C too. So it'd be important to make sure you may be able to retire. So I don't know your particular circumstances, but it's important to make sure that you meet the minimum, like that you would still be entitled to a waiver depending on your age and years of service. But technically speaking, no, once you've chosen option A, the layoff provisions kick in, and you could potentially independently retire if you meet, depending if you're group 1 or group 2. But if you're not, meet those minimum requirements, I would ensure that you connect with our pension and benefit folks, our PIPS, or your staff resource, or even your steward too. A lot of our stewards are very aware of the modalities there. And ultimately, we would verify on your behalf because, it's important once you make that choice, it's irrevocable, whether you choose option A, B, or C. Once you make that determination, you can't change your mind. So that's why it's important that you take all of this under consideration. Is there another part of the question that I didn't
No,
answer?
that was it.
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
Okay.
The next question here, how is 40 kilometers between zone 2 and zone 3 for a reasonable job offer location accounted for? Is it a straight line or is it an actual distance covered by road, which may be more of a straight line?
That's a good question.
Is it radius?
I think it's radius. Yes, I think the term they use is radius. I'm not 100% sure, but I do believe it's a radius. The exact wording escapes me, but I believe they use radius.
If you want to if that person wants to send the question in to ask us, we can
definitely. Yeah, for sure.
Next question, is salary protected to the exact salary or just equivalent levels? For example, if a salary is K, but another level's top salary is 87K and
Mhm.
considered equivalent, would I be paid 87 or 89 in my new role?
89. Yeah. So your salary will be protected at the old group and level. The only impact is that you won't get, so you're getting 89,000. So if you're and your salary protected in a position that has a lower level maximum 87. So you're in terms of practical implications, you're not going to lose salary at 89. However, you're going to need to wait for the 87, your former group and level, or sorry, your current salary protected group and level to match the 80, your former group and level. So you won't get the echelons, you won't get the increase, the step increases until they're even. You will get the economic increases of your former group and level. So if you're 89,000, they add a step and it goes to 92 uh, plus economic increase, you will only be entitled to the economic increase, unfortunately, and not to the step of your former position. But the salary is protected where you're at now, you're not losing, but the practical implications are going forward and depending where the positions are in terms of the salary grid and the step progression.
The next question here, if I need to go on mat leave during the 12-month surplus period, does my 12-month clock pause until I return to work, even if it is after 12 months? What protections are in place for these individuals?
Very important question, and we're actually having discussions with the Treasury Board on this for protected leave, we call it. So if you're on maternity leave, what happens? Parental leave, if you're on current sick leave without pay due to disability, what happens? If you're about to go on mat leave, what happens? Because we know or on parental, you have to sign an engagement that okay, for the top ups, you need to return for the equal amount of time you're off, whether it's 12 months or 15 months or 18 months. So these are important considerations, and we're waiting for the employer to get back to us. I mean, what they're telling us is on a case by case scenario, but we want them to ensure that the message is being consistently applied, and we want to know what protections are in place for people who are on what we consider protected leave versus unprotected leave, like spousal relocation or leave for personal needs or education leave. But so we're looking at for folks who whose rights are grounded in the collective agreement. Parental, maternity, disability. What happens to what direction are you being offered, and what protections are going to be included. So thank you for that. Please, follow our website. We're going to update our folks either through email or through the website, answering these specific questions because we're engaging Treasury Board on this, and we want to make sure that there won't be any issues.
I see a couple questions about ERI, the Early Retirement Incentive Initiative. If you could just sort of provide an update for folks on that and sort of explain where that's at right now.
Yeah. Well, that's it. We're waiting to, it's an incentive being offered by the employer, has nothing to do with the pension waiver protection provisions under the collective and the in the context of a WFA and the Public Service Superannuation Act. So this is independent of that. You already have acquired rights for pension waivers. This other benefit is to benefit, the employer calls it, it's an incentive, and it has to pass the House. And once it's passed, and again, it's voluntary, you don't have to, if you don't have to accept it, but essentially this is an incentive for folks who don't meet the minimum requirements under current pension legislation to leave the public service without penalty. So that's all it is. There's no additional benefit to it other than you not being penalized for not having met the minimum current requirements if you're not laid off or impacted. So like I said earlier, about 68,000 people received this, this offer, so to speak, and it will only be, in effect should it pass. And from what we understand, it will pass. So again, we encourage folks to take to understand really what the ramifications are of this, and that it's not a supplement to your pension. There won't be any supplement. It's just you will leave with what you've accrued, nothing more, nothing less. Well, nothing less is they won't be applying the pension, the penalty for not having attained the minimum requirements in terms of age and service under the pension plan.
So we'll end it there. I just want to take the time to thank everyone for your questions today. If we didn't get to your question or you think of one after the webinar, again, take a moment to review our WFA webpage, which includes a comprehensive FAQ, or you can reach out to your local steward or contact us using the Ask Us form. The links will be in the chat. Thank you once again to Dean and Taya for being with us today. We've included the links to the available WFA resources in the chat. Go find our webpage. Keep an eye out in your inbox for invitations for any upcoming webinars. We recently sent one out for a town hall for next Tuesday with our president, Sean O'Reilly, and the VPs. And keep an eye out for other ones as well. I mentioned the RTO one earlier. This should be coming out in the next couple of weeks. Thank you for everyone participating today, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks, folks.